And so, class, we have arrived at the seventh age of globalization, our present age, an age I call the digital age because, of course, the most dynamic set of technologies driving change in our time are the digital technologies: connectivity, computation, artificial intelligence, robotics. That's not the only thing that is happening in our world today. We are in a very complex time of major environmental crises, major geopolitical change, major demographic change, and, of course, the digital transformations as well. So as we arrive at the seventh age of globalization, as we arrive at our present age, we are faced with the complexities of the 21st century and an entirely interconnected world that needs to act together, to cooperate, to be at peace, to find shared solutions to these great 21st century challenges. Now, why is it that we have entered a new age? Because the industrial age was characterized by the drive of fossil fuels. It was characterized by the rise of the West. It was characterized by literally industrial sectors being the dominant and leading sectors of the economy of the advanced nations. Now, in the 21st century, things have changed. The driving technological advances are coming through digitization in countless ways. The effects of the digital economy are felt all over the world, but also are being led by many parts of the world. This is no longer a Western-led world. This is a world that is converging in living standards and a world that is experiencing and benefiting from innovations taking place in many parts of the world. If Britain and the United States were the two hegemons of the industrial age, I would say we have reached a post-hegemonic world. There is no one single dominant country or even dominant region today. The United States is still a major power, but it no longer dominates the world economic scene. Europe is still a very rich and in many, many ways highly successful part of the world, but it certainly doesn't dominate the scene. Major rising powers like China and India, major regional powers or superpowers like Russia, or in Western Asia, Iran, major regional groupings like the Southeast Asian countries in ASEAN, a group of 10 countries of Southeast Asia, formerly colonies of Britain and France primarily, now is a significant actor on the global scene. When we combine the new driving forces of technological change with the changes of geopolitics, with the new era of multipolarity, with the great challenges of the environmental crises, it is useful for us to consider that we have arrived at a new age of globalization, one that's going to need different principles and different solutions because of the uniqueness of the challenges that we face in the 21st century. Now, just as the Industrial Revolution had a long stretch of takeoff before James Watt's steam engine and the rise of the modern factory, the digital age is the result of a long process of technological advancement. So we're not at a new moment that suddenly has sprung out of thin air. On the contrary, we can certainly find at least origins of the digital age in thinking by mathematicians and engineers in the 19th century, but I would say the real birth of the digital breakthroughs of our time started in the 1930s. We can even identify the individuals that were key in this incredible breakthrough. One was a genius of mathematics, Alan Turing, who already in the 1930s had the idea that the world's information could be processed just as 0 and 1s in the binary code, and he had the idea of a universal computing machine that would actually do that processing. And a contemporary of his in the 1930s and 1940s, another genius mathematician, John von Neumann from Hungary, designed the first architecture of a modern computer. So the 1930s and 1940s was the birth of the computer age in the modern sense, conceptually in design, and building the first computers with large vacuum tubes rather than tiny transistors, so that the earliest computers filled whole rooms with far, far less power than tiny fractions of the computing power that we carry each day on our smartphones. But this was the birth of the digital age. World War II was, as often is the case with technology, a major impetus for huge advances. Indeed, Alan Turing was one of the great code breakers of the Nazi Germany code that enabled and supported the Allied victory over Nazi Germany. So he used early computer calculations and computer design in the wartime, and the war research gave rise to many technologies that would become fundamental technologies for the digital age. The most important of these was the investigation of semiconductor materials. That is, materials that have the properties of being able to turn on and off the flow of electrons. And it was based on those wartime investigations of these semiconductor materials that in 1947, another great breakthrough occurred in giving rise to the digital age in Bell Laboratories, when William Shockley and his colleagues invented the transistor. And the transistor is a semiconductor that can then be used as the basis for Alan Turing's and John von Neumann's computer. And indeed, from the discovery, or I should say the invention of the transistor in 1947, the digital age begins to progress, because those large vacuum tubes of the early computers could be miniaturized into smaller and smaller transistors, with more and more transistors fit into the processing units of the computer. The next breakthrough was the integrated circuit to etch transistors and other electronic components right onto a silicon wafer, which was an invention made at the end of the 1950s. And with integrated circuits, suddenly it was possible to put the computer systems onto smaller and smaller chips with more and more transistors, and therefore greater and greater speed and more computing power and power to store data. It was already noted, of course, in the mid-1960s that by Gordon Moore, who was an executive of one of the leading new semiconductor companies, Intel, that the miniaturization of transistors was proceeding so rapidly that every year or two, the number of transistors that could be put into a given area on a chip was doubling. This, of course, was Moore's law. Gordon Moore thought that this would proceed another 10 years, perhaps, maybe 5 more doublings, which would mean another 32-fold increase of computing power. But in fact, Moore's law was to apply all the way until the end of the 20th century and into the 21st century, by which time billions and billions of chips were put onto the microprocessors made by Intel and by other tech companies. So that revolution of integrated circuitry made possible the miniaturization of computers, the desktop and laptop computers of the 1970s and 80s. And that set of inventions, of course, was joined by the wondrous inventions of new kinds of connectivity of data, and especially the birth of the internet as a way to transmit vast amounts of bits of those zeros and ones between computers and then between mobile devices and now the ubiquitous smartphones, which the world holds in its hands every day, everywhere it travels, transforming life into a non-stop connectivity. In this period, yet another revolution came, starting in the 1950s and 60s as computation power rose. The idea that machines could be taught or trained or designed to be smarter and smarter in a wider and wider range of skills or intelligences gave rise to the notion of artificial intelligence or machine intelligence and machine learning. And while that area of research has now been underway for more than 70 years, the breakthroughs are now pouring forth at a rate that is absolutely breathtaking, so that we never quite know what's coming around the corner with the next chat box, the next chat GPT, the next smart system. When we combine computation, data storage, data transmission, connectivity, artificial intelligence, the accumulation of these technologies and their application to every sphere of life and every sector of the economy is absolutely breathtaking. It is the digital technologies that power worldwide economic change, that disrupt the old jobs, that create the new opportunities, new ways for learning, new ways for research, new ways for education, new ways for healthcare, new ways for manufacturing, new ways for mining and agriculture, pervasive changes in the economy. And that is our new digital age. The question for us is, will these new technologies bring us the kind of benefits that they potentially can? More learning, better healthcare, more productivity, more leisure time? Or will they bring us ills, as breakthrough technologies always have the potential to do as well? Will the digital technologies be militarized? Will our efforts, our social energies, be directed towards autonomous weapon systems rather than autonomous mining sectors, saving miners from the dangers and scourges of physical labor in the mines? That's the kind of question we face. Will we have a world filled with information, or will we have a world filled with deep fakes? Will we have a world of new freedom to search out new opportunities, or will we have a world of non-stop surveillance by government or by private entities? These are the choices exactly now on the crossroads of the digital age. And given that we are also facing major environmental crises and major geopolitical challenges, will the digital age foster more cooperation as our leaders and societies Zoom together and connect together online, or will they foster more dangerous interstate rivalries and competition and militarization? Will they make possible breakthroughs in environmental sustainability, or will they merely intensify the demands for energy, and if it's dirty energy, driving us even faster towards the climate abyss? In other words, we're in a world of choices now, but definitely in a new digital age. What are our goals in this class? Well, first it is to understand the history of the digital breakthroughs so that we can appreciate how we have come to a world empowered by new technologies. It is to understand the economic implications of connectivity, computation, artificial intelligence, data storage and transmission, so that we can appreciate how economic lives are likely to change. It is to understand the potential positive applications of the new technologies in the sustainable development challenges, in cleaning the environment, in achieving universal access to quality education, in achieving universal health coverage, and the other sustainable development goals. And it is to understand the potential risks and downsides of our new age, how cyber warfare or surveillance or fake news can be the accompaniment of the digital revolution that ends up imperiling the world rather than assisting the world. These are the areas that I would like you to think about and to study as you consider the seventh age of globalization, the digital age.